The rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the pavement of Willow Creek's quiet Main Street. Clara stood frozen under the awning of the old bookstore, her breath catching as she stared at the tiny, shivering shape huddled against a dumpster. Across the alley, it was a cat, barely more than a scrap of fur, its amber eyes wide and pleading through the downpour. Something in those eyes, raw, unguarded trust, pierced her heart. She didn't move, not at first, her sensible side screaming to keep walking, to stay dry, to mind her own business. But then the cat let out a faint, trembling mew, and Clara's resolve crumbled. She stepped into the rain, her sneakers soaking through, and knelt beside the creature. "Hey, little one," she whispered, her voice as soft as the rain. "You can stay out here." Clara Bennett was 32, a woman whose life had always been tidy, predictable, and safe. She worked as a librarian at Willow Creek's modest public library, a job that suited her quiet nature and love for stories. Her days were filled with the rustle of pages, the soft hum of the library's ancient heater, and the occasional chatter of patrons who knew her by name. Clara was kind but guarded, her smile warm yet rarely reached her eyes. She lived alone in a small apartment above the town's bakery, where the smell of fresh-baked bread drifted through her windows each morning. Her life was steady, but there was an ache she couldn't name, a loneliness that lingered like a shadow. The cat was a mess. Its fur was matted, streaked with mud, and its ribs poked sharply under its skin. Clara scooped it up, cradling it against her chest, feeling its tiny body tremble. She didn't think twice about the rain soaking her coat or the mud smearing her sleeves. She carried the cat to her car, wrapping it in an old sweater from the back seat. At the vet's office, Dr. Larson, a gruff man with a soft spot for strays, examined the kitten. "Malnourished, dehydrated, but tough," he said, peering over his glasses. "A fighter, you keeping him?" Clara hesitated, her practical side rearing up again. She wasn't a pet person. She didn't have the time, the space, the money. But then the cat looked up at her, its eyes steady and trusting, and she nodded. "Yeah, I'm keeping him." She named him Ember, for the spark in his amber eyes. Those first days were a challenge. Ember was skittish, darting under furniture at the slightest noise. He knocked over a lamp, shredded a throw pillow, and left claw marks on Clara's favorite armchair. She spent hours coaxing him out with bits of tuna, sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading aloud from her favorite novels. To soothe him, slowly, he began to trust her. He'd curl up on her lap while she graded library book reports, his purr a soft vibration against her thighs. He'd followed her to the kitchen, weaving between her legs, demanding scraps of chicken. At night, he'd slept at the foot of her bed, a warm weight that made the apartment feel less empty. Ember transformed over the months. His fur grew sleek and black, his frame filled out, and his eyes shined with mischief. He had quirks that made Clara laugh. He'd battered her earrings while she read, steal socks from the laundry basket, and perch on the windowsill to watch the bakery's delivery truck each morning. He became her confidant, her companion through long nights when the weight of her solitude pressed too hard. When her mother had passed away the previous year, Clara had grieved alone, unable to share the rawness of her loss with anyone. But Ember had been there, curled against her as she cried, his quiet presence a balm she didn't know she needed. Life moved forward, and Ember was woven into its fabric. Clara's days at the library were brighter. She'd tell patrons about Ember's latest antics, her face lit up in a way it never had before. She'd come home to find him waiting by the door, his tail flicking impatiently as if scolding her for being late. They'd develop routines. Sunday mornings spent with coffee and a book, Ember sprawled across her lap. Evenings by the window, watching the town's lights flicker on. He was no longer a stray, but family, longer a piece stray of. But her heart she didn't know was missing. 2 years after finding Ember, met Daniel. It happened at the library of all places, when he came in looking for a book on woodworking. He was 35, with warm brown eyes and a quiet laugh that made her stomach flutter. Daniel was a carpenter, his hands calloused from years of shaping wood into furniture. He'd moved to his Willow Creek to start over after a painful divorce, seeking the simplicity of a small town. Their first conversation was brief, Clara recommending a book, Daniel asking about the library's hours, but it sparked something. He kept coming back, borrowing books he didn't always read, just to talk to her. She noticed the way he listened, really listened, when she spoke, and the way his smile made her feel seen. Their courtship was slow, deliberate, like the way Daniel would sand a piece of oak until it gleamed. They went for walks along the creek, shared pie at the diner, and spent evenings on Clara's couch, laughing over old movies. Ember took to Daniel immediately, sprawling across his lap with shameless affection. "He's got good taste," Daniel teased, scratching his Ember's chin. Clara watched them, her heart swelling. Daniel proposed a year later on a crisp autumn evening by the creek, with Ember weaving between their legs. He'd carved a wooden ring box, simple and elegant, and when Clara said yes, Ember let out a loud meow, as if giving his approval. Wedding. Planning consumed their lives. Clara and Daniel wanted something intimate, a celebration that felt like Willow Creek, rustic, warm, and true. They chose the old barn at Maple Hill Farm, its weathered beams strung with fairy lights, its fields golden under the September sun. Clara spent evenings poring over details, wildflower bouquets, a bluegrass band, a menu of comfort food. Ember was a constant presence, batting at ribbon samples or napping on stacks of invitations. His Daniel built a wooden arch for his ceremony, carving their initials into the base. "For us," he said, kissing her forehead, "and for Ember, the little matchmaker." The night before the wedding, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, Ember curled beside her, and traced the lines of her life. She thought of the rain-soaked alley where she'd found him, of the quiet nights they'd shared, of the love that had grown from that single act of kindness. She thought of Daniel, of the life they were building, and of Ember, who'd been there for it all. "You're part of this, you know," she whispered, stroking his fur. Ember blinked up at her, his eyes glowing in the moonlight, and she smiled. Tomorrow's a big day. The wedding dawned clear and golden, the air crisp with the promise of fall. Maple Hill Farm buzzed with life. Guests arriving in sundresses and boots, the band tuning fiddles, the smell of barbecue drifting from the caterer's tent. Clara stood in the farmhouse's upstairs bedroom, her ivory dress simple and flowing, her hair loose in soft waves. She felt a flutter of nerves, but when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who was ready, not just for marriage, but for the life she'd chosen. Downstairs, the barn was a vision. Tables were draped in burlap, scented with mason jars of daisies and lavender. The wooden arch stood at the altar, draped in greenery. Guests milled about, their laughter mingling with the music. And there, weaving through the crowd, was Ember. He wore a tiny bow tie, navy blue to match Daniel's suit, fastened to a soft collar. Clara's best friend, Sarah, had crafted it, grinning as she tied it on. "He's the real star of the show," Sarah teased. Ember strutted with surprising dignity, his tail high, pausing to accept pets from guests. Children giggled, chasing him gently. Older folks smiled, charmed by the cat who seemed to belong to everyone. The ceremony began as the sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the fields. Clara walked down the aisle, her arm looped through her father's, her eyes locked on Daniel. He stood beneath the arch, his smile steady and sure. The officiant, a local pastor, spoke of love as a choice, a promise, a gift. Clara and Daniel exchanged vows, their voices trembling with emotion. "I choose you," Clara said, her eyes shining. "Every day, I choose you." Daniel's hand squeezed hers, his voice thick as he echoed her words. Then came the surprise. Sarah stepped forward, Ember cradled in her arms. The crowd murmured, curious. Sarah set him down, and he trotted to the cottage altar, a small velvet pouch tied to his collar. Inside were the rings. Clara's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel knelt, untying the pouch with a grin. "Told you he's part of this," he whispered. Ember sat regally beside them, his tail flicking as Daniel slid the ring onto Clara's finger. The guests erupted in applause, some wiping tears, others laughing at the cat's perfect timing. The moment was electric, a blend of joy and wonder. Clara looked at Ember, then at Daniel, and felt her heart overflow. This was their story, messy, unexpected, beautiful. The cat she'd found in the rain had led her here, to this man, this moment, this love. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Ember let out a soft meow, and the crowd dissolved into laughter. The band struck up a lively tune, and the celebration began. The reception was a blur of dancing, toasts, and stories. Clara and Daniel moved through it all, hand in hand, their laughter ringing out. Ember was never far, weaving between tables, stealing bits of chicken from distracted guests. Sarah gave a speech, her voice cracking as she described Clara's kindness, how a stray cat had changed her friend's life. "That's what love does," she said, raising her glass. "It finds you when you least expect it." As the night wound down, Clara and Daniel slipped away to the edge of the field, watching the stars emerge. Ember followed, curling up beside them. Clara leaned against Daniel, her head on his shoulder. "I didn't know," she said softly. "When I found him, I didn't know he'd bring me to you." Daniel kissed her temple. "He's a good cat," he murmured. "The best." Their story didn't end there. Ember lived for years, growing grayer but no less mischievous. He was there when Clara and Daniel brought home their first child, a girl named Lily, who learned to toddle with Ember's tail as her guide. He was there through late-night feedings, first steps, and family Christmases. When he passed, quietly in his sleep, Clara and Daniel buried him by the creek under a willow tree. They cried, but they smiled too, because his life had been full, and so was theirs. Ember's legacy lingered. Clara began volunteering at the local shelter, helping other strays find homes. She told Ember's story to anyone who'd listen, her voice steady with conviction. One small act can change everything. She'd say, "A cat, a person, a life, it all matters." Her words inspired others, and Willow Creek's shelter saw a surge in adoptions. Clara and Daniel's home remained open, always with a cat or two weaving through their lives, each one a reminder of the love that started it all. This is the story of a woman, a cat, and the love that grew from a single act of kindness. It's a story of how even the smallest creatures that can leave the deepest marks, how love finds us in the rain, in the quiet, in the promises we keep. If this tale warmed your heart, share it with someone who needs a little light. Like, comment, subscribe, and join us at The Kind Story for more moments that remind us what it means to be human and to be kind.